moving on from Ferrari, the Italian one, to the French Ferrari. I mean,
Do we need to talk about Alpine? It's terribly depressing.
yeah, I don't want to, but I,
And welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Hassett, joined by the casual F1 fan, and we have a stellar race to talk about. It feels like F1 is in a very good place right now. How are you, casual? You enjoy the race?
awesome. F1 is booming. 3 different drivers could have possibly won the race on Sunday, and has F1 been better, at least in the last decade or so? I'd say probably not. Maybe I'm being too much of a recency bias because 2021 was awesome, but wow, this is it. It was a fun race, and honestly, I mean, Lewis used to say that. Lewis says this word a lot: gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has been a long time since we have had. Well, it's been a while since we've even had anyone else fighting for wins consistently, but it's even longer since we've had 3 teams. Like, I think it is just a case of over the last decade, we've usually had only one team taking it to Mercedes or taking it to Red Bull in this instance. So it's either been like Ferrari taking it to Mercedes, or Red Bull taking it to Mercedes, or Ferrari taking it to Red Bull. And I'm trying to think, when is the last time where we've had literally 3 teams that every weekend have had a chance at the fight?
2010. That was the last time, and that's
yeah.
I mean, a bit of it in 2012 to an extent. I mean, maybe we can say that because it was a wacky season, but it was a bit like, at least the first 7 races, it felt like you can turn up and almost anyone can win the race. So,
which is what it feels like now.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the good thing about it. Finally, the regulations are actually making sense and being fun.
Yeah. I think this was kind of bound to happen because we had regulations that even Nui and everyone were saying like these are very prescriptive, and then Nui was surprised by the amount of diversity across the the ideas and the concepts. But I think that given that the convergence was always going to be hard and fast with these regulations, so once they started converging, it was going to quickly converge. And I think this is really exciting now for the next season and a half, because whether we have a title fight this year, it takes a lot of variables because of the big swing that's needed. Constructors definitely, but I mean for drivers,
56
but I think it
is
lines us up for. It is and it isn't. I mean, like, I think just with the length of the season, it's still not a crazy. It only takes two DNFs.
15 races left.
This is my point. Like, so you've got 15
it.
races left, and it only takes like 2 DNFs. Just one collision for Max and a mechanical failure, and all of a sudden, both Norris and Leclerc are right in there. You know, so it sounds crazy. Especially, I think if this was any season of the past where we had 15 races to go and there was a 50-point swing, we'd probably be saying, well, I mean, you're bound to have some mechanical failures, but just because of how reliable these cars are now, it sounds a bit more ridiculous. You know,
I mean, even I think 2021 Max had a lead of, I think it was 40 points or something going into British Grand Prix.
I think so. It was something crazy.
Something like that. And from that point onwards, we had that huge swing in Silverstone and in Hungary, where lots of shit happened. I think again, maybe it could happen. I mean, come on, 15 races, 56 points. A man can hope.
It's also a situation where, like, I mean, if this now, we've got 3 races coming up that are very much, more traditional circuits, if you want.
Marquee circuits, you can say. I mean, they will give you a clear idea of what the rest of the season is going to be.
Exactly. So I think, like, if you've got Leclerc and Norris thinking there is even a sniff of a championship, you've got to say that those 2 guys are going to just go more and more aggressive as the season goes on, because they've got nothing to lose, everything to gain, and Max has everything to lose and kind of nothing to gain from being overly aggressive. So you could have easily situations where, we get a front row lockout of Leclerc and Max, and Leclerc's thinking, I'm going into this corner first, I don't care.
Yeah.
and all of a sudden both of those are out and Norris takes a leap. Like, these things could happen the more and more it goes on. At the moment, they're all friendly and happy because it's
Yeah,
a new
I'm just
experience.
waiting, man. And I mean, that's the best part. The rivalries, that's what we want. We want rivalries. We want all these goody paddle games, whatever, just fuck off. We don't want that. We don't want that bullshit.
They'll fall
Screw
apart
that.
quickly.
Seriously, I mean that it only takes one crash. I'm telling you, it only takes one crash between Lando and Max. You'll see the wheels turning. I'm telling you.
It's even. I think it's even less than that. All it takes is like I said, one DNF, for example, right? And then all of a sudden you're down to a place where both Leclerc and Norris say are within kind of 20 points of Max, within a reasonable kind of catch-up period, right?
Yeah.
So say that happens with 10 races to go and there's only 20 points between them and Max.
Wow.
You're going to get a situation where they're going to start being more and more aggressive because, like, you're talking two guys. Look at Max in 21. Like, the aggression was at a peak because Max hadn't got a championship, and
I think he knew that was the time he knew that he had to put everything that he had into every weekend, and that's what.
Because no one knew what the regulations would be like, and I think. I'm sure that Leclerc and Norris both have that in the back of their heads that, we've only got this year and next year, and then maybe we'll get the regulations right. Like, Leclerc could be thinking, maybe we'll get the regulations right. But it's a coin toss.
It's not a guarantee, right? It's not a guarantee.
Nothing. Yeah. So I could see them very much being like, right, if there's a sniff of it this year, they're going all in for it because even if they think, right, next year's the year, I'm sure they're still thinking there's a chance this year. And if 2026 comes around and McLaren get it wrong or Ferrari get it wrong, I might not get this chance again for 3 or 4 years. So, it's going to be fun.
If you're Liberty Media, I think what you want to do in the next 18 months is market the fuck out of Formula One. Yeah. Leave no stone unturned, nothing, because it will not get this opportunity again in the next couple of years from 2026 onwards. I'm telling you, and how close it is going to be in 2024 and 2025, most likely. You won't have that in 2026. I mean, we've seen the pattern. We've seen it far too many times. It's not going to happen. They have to be on their toes. Just market the fuck out of this.
I will say I am getting more optimistic about 26, and we'll talk about this maybe more next week, I guess. But
we'll talk about it later in the. It's in the later parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. Yeah.
But I'm more optimistic about 2026. I think this. Yeah. I think I've been thinking about it in terms of cost cap and development and everything.
It's so interesting because I have a very. I think compared to a lot of people, I had a very contrarian view on this. Maybe I think Break F1, I think he had something similar in mind. I think he's probably the only one who had a similar view. I will get to it later, but again, coming back to the Canadian Grand Prix and where we are, I think the most important thing for me was, and I guess a lot of people forget that this thing actually happened. The extreme wets actually performed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And in the again, to people who don't know that, the extreme wets are a new range of tires that Pirelli has finally introduced, where it's not the same traditional wet tires that used to be there, which were shite, which basically did nothing. So these tires, precisely. And I mean, just imagine if by the time Kevin Magnussen was P4 and I think Hülkenberg was P8 or P7, something like this, if at that point rain had intensified, you are looking at a possibility of a Haas P1, P2. And it's only possible because Pirelli actually finally improved. And again, kudos to them. At least on a certain level, they've made improvements. And honestly, I was a bit pissed. I remember, I think I reached out to you about an hour earlier before the race and you told me it was raining. The first thing that came to my mind was, okay, it's going to be a delayed start.
Yeah.
So fortunately, that was not the case. And I just had so much fun. It started at around 11:30 p.m. my time. It went on until 1:15 a.m. And again, I had a blast. And I think that's what Formula One is supposed to be.
It was a race where there was always something going on. Like, there was no point where you were like, okay, like in Imola, for example, we had an interesting start and a very interesting end. But in this race, it was like the whole way through there was
Everything.
something happening. You know,
I think the
we
best part
didn't get
was
that normal phase, because there is always in Formula One races, I feel like, that normal phase where people kick into management and we just get that kind of 20 laps
things
or
are
so where,
simmering a bit. Yeah.
and then it kind of, you're waiting for it to build up. This was just, there was no point during this where I was like, okay, I can go make a coffee now, because I was like, no, I'm gonna miss
Yeah.
something. So you know,
I think there was one point where in the first stint when Lando just pulled off, when Lando was lapping 3 seconds a lap quicker than Max. And I think it
Yeah.
was at that point I thought, oh God, Lando has got it. He's not
Yeah.
going to be caught. And then again, safety car came in and things happened. I think
So-
it's perfect time actually, to actually pivot into the whole point about Max Verstappen winning this race. Again, there are quite a few who are claiming that this was down to luck to an extent. But how would you view the entire drive? I mean, how would you view Max Verstappen's entire weekend?
I think this is a situation again where there were points during the weekend, especially like when it started to dry out and Max said, I can't take the curbs, and kind of we knew where this track was going to be. And I mean, look where Perez was over the course of the weekend. I think this is a situation where you have to say, like, yes, that is probably still the fastest car, but it's still only the fastest car at the hands of Max. And, I think there are drivers who, I've been a bit harsh on Perez recently, even as a Perez fan, but I think there are drivers who would definitely perform better than Perez. Like, I reckon you put a Lawson in there, he probably would perform better at the moment. One of the things is,
why? How?
I just
You've
think
seen 5 races from the guy where he was teamed up with Yuki Tsunoda, and that's the benchmark you're going with.
it's not that. It's because I think that car is incredibly difficult to adapt to, and I think that's where it's been really tough for
Then how will
Gasly and
Liam
Albon.
Lawson adapt?
If you watched him in Super Formula, that's what bought me. Yeah, that's what made me think, right, he could jump into that. Look, maybe I'm wrong, but I think at the moment it would be hard to perform worse than Perez. But look, that's beside the point. That's a bigger story. Like, Carlos Sainz would be the ideal driver, obviously. I'm just saying, if you were to
I'd
swap
put him.
if Red Bull wanted to swap him with someone from, say, the Red Bull family at the moment, and didn't want to bring Sainz in because they clearly don't. I'm saying Lawson, preferably for me, Yuki Tsunoda, but again, it seems like Red Bull aren't interested in him either. It doesn't seem like Horner's interested in any drivers at the minute, but that's a longer conversation.
He's interested his attention has been occupied at quite a few places.
Yeah, WhatsApp conversations, things like that. I think though the point I'm making is that Red Bull, I think, is the fastest, but only in the hands of Max, who I think can extract that. It feels very at the moment, it feels kind of like Alonso in 2005, 2006, where that Renault needed to be kind of wrangled a very specific way, and Alonso was able to do it so well. Like, you remember his steering into the corners in that car was just ridiculous.
Just
I
crazy.
feel like
And
it's that
he was
kind
still
of
able
car.
to keep the tires alive.
Yeah. And I feel like it's that kind of car. And it's like, if we're in a situation where they've got a massive lead, Checo obviously fits in there somewhere. But now that everyone's closer, all of those weaknesses are being seen on Checo's side, because he can't just get that last few percentages out of the car. Because I think people in Formula One sometimes forget that realistically the difference between first and like 10th or 11th usually isn't a massive amount of talent. It's that last percentage that makes the real difference.
Precisely.
Could
Do you
anyone else?
think? You mentioned something. Do you think Red Bull was the fastest car in Canada?
By all rights, no. I think if we had a clean race, I think personally, if we had a clean race where it was maybe just inters onto slicks and it just went ahead and there was no kind of safety car mess and jumping back and forth between things, I think there's a good chance the McLaren could have taken that, because I think over a long stint, it seemed like Lando was able to kind of control the car better and control the tires better. Because we saw at one point, Lando, like you said, just pulling away because he was able to just manage the inters. Yeah,
that was crazy.
So I think, like, over one lap, I think the McLaren just didn't have it, and we saw that in qualifying. But if you took it over the course of a normal, like even if it was just a dry race and it was just a one-stopper or two-stopper, I think McLaren probably was the quickest this weekend. But I think McLaren basically got the unfortunate situation of having a reverse Miami, right? Where the safety car just...
I mean, again, it's very hard to say, right? Because apparently, again, what I've checked from the replays, I've not been able to reach a conclusive answer to this. Apparently, Lando had decent enough time to jump into the pits. He kind of missed the boat on that one. But I think they probably didn't lose the race on that front. They lost the race when they went for the extra lap on the inters, when George and Max had pitted. Because I think Lando had decent enough time, but the next lap, Max was able to close up, and that kind of took the thing away.
Yeah. There was a couple of issues there, but I think if that safety car timing had been a little bit better for Norris, or if McLaren had been able to make the call quicker, I think there's a good chance he wins that race. But I mean,
handily.
That's the kind of thing where, though, it just this is what's great about F1 at the minute. It's so close.
Again, what if he actually got out here again? Everything was fine. What if he made a mistake later in the race? Could have easily happened. And that's the beauty of the whole thing, because there are so many variables. We can sit and say, okay, this thing caused the race, this thing happened. But the reality is you just cannot, because Lando made a mistake later in the race. Max did. George made plenty of them.
Everybody made mistakes. Yeah.
Everyone did. And that's... Yeah. Yeah, I saw your tweet as well. That's nonsensical. He wasn't even talking about that.
He just made a funny comment because it was a Red Bull went off in the exact same corner from a really famous race.
It was a replica of that, and I thought the same thing when it had happened. And my reaction was, okay, Seb was able to control that one, but Checo couldn't. That was the first reaction that I had.
Yeah.
Again, people are just waiting to get offended. So,
but back to the main thing. I think the thing you were saying about variables, that's what makes it great. Is just. Like, I think the McLaren was probably the fastest in a normal race this weekend, but the point being, it seems to be so close between McLaren and Red Bull that realistically we are going to get to the point. I think, especially because McLaren's still kind of understanding some of that, those upgrades. I think we could be at a point where over the course of the rest of the season, it is really down to the driver. As opposed to the cars being so... There'll be certain tracks, I think, where the McLaren will just be out and out fastest, and vice versa for the Red Bull, potentially for the Ferrari, etc., etc. But I think
in Barcelona
a lot of the tracks... Yeah, exactly. But a lot of these tracks, it feels like there is a situation now where the driver managing the tyres correctly, being aggressive, all these little things, the driver can actually make the difference now. And that's when Formula One becomes so good, because it's not a spec series, so it doesn't happen all the time, and when it does happen...
Wait 2.5 years, basically. We've waited 2.5 years for this very moment. And that's why I say, I mean, at this very point, Liberty has to put all its marketing dollars into this, because it will not get better than this. This is the moment when all eyes should be on the sport. And I think, at this point, it's possibly the best part where, we give some credit to Red Bull as well, because a lot of times drivers take the credit, but I think we have to give credit to Red Bull on this front, because at every moment throughout that race, they did not make a single mistake.
No.
There was no... I'd say arguably Mercedes made a mistake in terms of strategy to an extent when it came to pitting, when Max pitted, George should have ideally stayed out. That would have been the point where he could have performed the overcut. He did not. It was very close, but I think he could have done that. And similarly, I think the similar thing happened with McLaren. The Red Bull was perfect. And it's just the game of inches. And Max does not make mistake. Red Bull does not make mistakes. When you have such a combination, you are going to win. And honestly, if there is any other driver in Red Bull, he might not have won the race on Sunday. If Max was in any other team, he might not have won the race on Sunday. And that's what we have to realize. It's the combination. It's just perfect.
Yep. Yeah. And I think Red Bull deserve that credit. It's going to be very interesting to see how much of that they can pull into 26. But yeah.
Yeah. Where Max leaves to Mercedes.
Yeah. Not going to happen. I think it's just a case of, I think, like, I'm just loving this because we're just so close now between the two. But one thing I hope we can start to see as well is that for a long time now, I've been saying Norris is definitely one of the best drivers on the grid. Like, he's up there with Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell. Like, if you get him in the right car, he can perform. And I hope that finally now, like, he's getting that recognition because he's finally getting a car where, like, we saw it in 2021. We saw glimpses where in 2021 he pulled that car up to the front and did some incredible driving. But I'm hoping now we do get this week in, week out where, you know, Norris can show, look, I'm just as good. Like, I can be up there. And another thing this weekend cemented, and I want to talk about Mercedes, is Russell is up there. Whatever happened last year, people need to kind of forget about because one bad year happens to almost every driver. You know, every driver has one off season or one off race.
I think before we get to Russell, I wanted to touch on one more thing, and it's more around. I mean, in the previous 5-10 minutes, we've talked about how Lando and Max were fighting for the win. There was this third team who, out of the blue, it just emerged as the leading team and secured pole position with basically identical time to Max. I think it could have won the race in the right circumstances. Possibly a mistake too many. But what do you make of the surprise resurgence of Mercedes?
I'm not really that surprised by it, to be honest, because as soon as we got weird conditions in the asphalt at like the new renewed surface this weekend, my brain did start going, I wonder if Mercedes are going to kind of pull something here. Because when we saw them in free practice, I always am a bit... Mercedes in free practice this year, it's always like, right, as soon as they're leading the times, I'm like, they're going to have a terrible Q2. But one thing I did have in the back of my mind, as soon as we knew there'd be kind of difficult conditions in qualifying and the race in terms of the track ramp up and all these different things.
Yeah.
The thing it reminded me of is China sprint, right? And I think this is one thing that if you look over the course of qualifying and the race, it makes sense as to why Mercedes made a bigger leap this weekend. So first thing I will say, I think Mercedes have made progress in their car, right? And I think they should be very close to Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull on a normal weekend going forward, right?
Yeah.
A lot closer than they were. But I don't think they've made a massive leap to where they're going to be right up there with McLaren going forward, because it feels to me like part of this is on this type of track, it worked out perfectly because they are harder on their tires than the other drivers, which means they get their tires into the working window, or other teams, sorry, which means they get their tires into the working window quicker, which helps in qualifying. So while the Red Bull and the McLaren are struggling, McLaren specifically, we've seen this at Miami, we've seen it again this weekend. The McLaren is very easy on its tires, which really helps Norris in a normal race because he might be slower than Max at the start, and then as we saw in Imola, he's kinder on those tires.
Back,
yeah. So I think that's where McLaren are having issues in qualifying because they're not getting the tires like up to temperature and in that working window quick enough. Whereas Mercedes are, but then we saw in the race, Mercedes were great at this because they could get into that window and fly up really quickly. But they had to pit for new inters. And that was partly a strategic, like, okay, that gives us newer tires. But it was also because we knew George...
You mean the fresh mediums, right? At the end.
Was it not a second pair of inters? I'm trying to think. Or was it a second pair of mediums? I can't remember.
In the end, it was the second pair of mediums.
Right, okay. Well,
right at the end of the race, right? When they pitted during the safety car. That's what you're talking about.
Was that mediums? Was it? I thought it was inters off the top of my head, but yeah.
No, yeah.
It was a long race. But yes, you're right. It was mediums, wasn't it?
Yeah.
My point is, though, they seem to be a lot harder on their tires, which I think, like, as we go to more traditional circuits and we don't have, like, we don't have that kind of ramp up, I think is going to be problematic for them, because even if the pace is there, they then have to sort this tire issue out. So I'm kind of expecting that Mercedes have made a jump, but I think that anyone getting excited that they're going to be fighting for podiums or wins now every weekend, I think should probably relax a little bit until the next kind of 3 races are over, because I feel like it's going to be a bit of a kind of a bit of a blow to the head when they show up in Barcelona, and they're kind of just behind Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull. Like those 3 are kind of pulling away, and they're just at the back again. That's where I expect it to be, and I think they're making good progress. I just hope it's not like Barcelona 22 or Brazil 22 or like a couple of races last year, Singapore, Austin, where everyone's like, they've done it, they've figured it out, and then 2 races later it's like, what the hell happened to Mercedes? So I think we need to be careful with these kind of Mercedes false dawns that have happened a lot in the last 3 years.
That's true. I think the first thing that actually, something that I pointed out the last time we recorded this thing and the one before that, it's around the fact that Mercedes is able to, at least in the last couple of races, in Imola, that was the first time I saw it, in Monaco as well. These were the 2 races where the car was actually predictable. They knew what was going on. Before that, one thing that has stood out is they after the practice session and qualifying, wherever they qualify, their hands up in the air, and they say, we have no clue how we are in this particular position.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an improvement from them. So what I've been able to gather is, again, the front wing has been given a lot of credit. Mm-hmm. I'd say maybe take it a step back. It's not a single component is not going to solve the entire thing. What has actually happened is Mercedes is finally able to figure out how to extract predictability from this car, where if they make X change, they know Y is going to happen, which they didn't really know earlier. What that has done is now they're able to set up the car properly, and that was something that stood out because Lewis was brilliant in free practice. The kind of laps that he was putting together, I mean, I thought he was going to win the race. That was my first reaction to the whole thing. But what also stood out was the car didn't look as bad or as much of a handful on the onboards, which was a massive surprise.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is the last couple of tracks at least, they are more of a slow speed nature. That's not the particular area where Mercedes has struggled. Mercedes, if you remember, struggled a lot in Jeddah, where they said that McLaren just pulled away in the high-speed sections. Next race in Barcelona is pretty much going to be that. And again, I'm not entirely sure about the tire wear thing. And Austria.
And Silverstone.
Silverstone is the daddy of high-speed tracks.
Yeah.
So, again, improvement is there. Now they finally know what they're doing. So maybe you'll see them close the gap. Do I see them challenging for pole position in Barcelona? I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, I hope it happens, because 4 teams fighting for wins. What better can we actually hope for?
Amazing.
It's the best thing for Formula 1. But for now, I'd still hold on to my cards. I'm not. Maybe the last 2 tracks or the last 3 tracks, they favored this particular car's characteristics, and when we get to a more conventional track, we'll be back to where we were. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think they've got that. They've got the high speed thing to take into account, because this track, as you said, was very limited in terms of you've basically got slow speed and then long straights. There's not really anything else. And Monaco similarly, and again
something similar.
Yeah, and again, I think those tire issues are going to kind of wreak havoc again in the next race, because you had Monaco where, like, look at how much George was behind because he was just managing the tires the entire way through the race. Obviously,
I mean, that was a shit show, honestly. I mean, they just basic. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, don't remind me of Monaco. I mean, those 100 minutes are not coming back in my life. God.
Speaking of shit shows, Ferrari.
Wait, before you proceed, I wanted to talk to you about one thing, and I think there is legitimacy to it to an extent. David Croft touched on it. I think first, By the way, you follow the Sky Sports commentary or the F1 TV commentary?
Sky Sports, I prefer. I just like Crofty.
Does it not make your heart crumble when every time he mentions Oscar Piastri as Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton as George Russell? I mean,
How do you mean?
why does
I
he
don't
not
know.
get the names right?
Has he
never
done this a
gets
lot?
the name right. Yeah,
I haven't even
every fucking
noticed.
time. I mean, I'm out there just.
Oh, you know what?
shouting
Now that you say it, yeah, he has done that a few times where he's been like, "There's Piastri
Yeah.
going by," and you're like, "No, that's Norris." I don't know.
Yeah,
It doesn't
that
really
happens. I mean, it happened. I think there was this battle between George, Lando, and Oscar, and he continued to call each other by the names are swapped for no fucking reason, and honestly, I tuned into Sky Sports this time around because I wanted to watch Villeneuve say something, but
Yeah.
but those bastards took him off the commentary, and after what happened on Friday,
Oh,
they said there's maybe
Villeneuve,
too
yeah.
much of controversy.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Eat shit, as Daniel Ricciardo says.
yeah. Apparently, Villeneuve came back and said, "Children are watching. Why are you getting personal? You're a role model." I think,
The thing is, can I just say, like, if Villeneuve had have just said, like, look, this guy doesn't deserve to be in F1 anymore because he's not performing, it would have been fine. For him to basically say he's never been good, I was like, oh, you've just completely thrown your
Bullshit.
whole argument out the window. Because, like, even if you said, right, one of his arguments, I know we're taking away, we'll get back to Canada in a second, right?
no
But
problem.
even if you said that, okay, Vettel fell apart in 2014, which I think to an extent there is some truth to that, right? You've still got a situation where Ricciardo still had to perform against the likes of Rosberg, Hamilton, and he still got wins that season. He was still amazing that season.
That
2016
win in Hungary is one of the best wet weather drives in Hungary.
Exactly,
I think he beat Alonso. He overtook all three of these guys. Right? He overtook Alonso, Rosberg, and Lewis for the win.
Yeah. And then you've got to say, right, okay, so then it's obviously the Verstappen conversation, right? He eventually started losing to Verstappen, right? But there's two things in that. One, it's fucking Verstappen. Like, I'm sorry, but I know it's a young Verstappen, but that talent was still... Verstappen was just quick out of the gates, and he basically just had to mature. So, if someone said to you now, oh yeah, that driver can't beat Verstappen, you'd be like, okay, like,
who can?
There's probably 2 or 3 drivers that could beat him at a different team maybe, but definitely not in a Red... Like, I don't think there's anyone who could beat Verstappen in a Red Bull. And that brings me to my second point, which is basically Newey and Fallows have both talked about the fact that when it came to Verstappen and once he got into the car, they figured out a way where basically they could make the car really twitchy, but it would be so much quicker. And this kind of followed into 2022. Albon's talked about it. The car was just like literally on a knife edge the whole time. Like it was like, what was it? He said it was like if you turned the sensitivity on your mouse up to 100%.
1,000, yeah.
And they have spoken about the fact that they basically realized Verstappen could do this and they just pushed it to the limits. And obviously there's not many drivers, if any, who can drive that, as we've seen by all of his teammates who are decent drivers. Like they're not bad. Like Perez was a good driver pre-Red Bull. Look at him now. Albon was a good driver pre-Red Bull. Look at what happened to his career. Obviously he's lucky now. Gasly the same. You know, these are not terrible drivers. So, and all of it, the last thing I'll say is all of it as well doesn't take into account that his driving at Renault was amazing. He was really good in Renault. Like 2020, he had a...
He beat Lando. He beat Carlos. He beat I think he also beat Checo. He beat he was the best driver in the midfield and in probably the third best midfield car because Renault was worse than McLaren and Mercedes, what was the pink Mercedes, Racing Point. Yeah. And he still did that. He got multiple podiums. And look, Villeneuve has a problem of going on rants.
Yeah.
If he had just stopped at the entire rant, if he just cut it down to 50%, the first part, bingo, perfect.
If he just said, this guy is only here for marketing reasons now, his best days are done, it would be kind of hard to argue with that because one of two things has happened to Ricciardo. Either he couldn't adapt to the McLaren and that killed his confidence, which is maybe a fair statement because we know Sainz and Norris both talked about how difficult that McLaren was to drive. Or the 2022 regulations just don't suit him at all, which also happens to drivers. Like, look at Hulkenberg, should have been this incredible driver coming in, and changes in Formula One just completely threw a spanner in the works. So it does happen, you know. Look at Perez, amazing driver, better than Bottas, but here we are.
Yeah,
I have to say better than Bottas at every point just to piss people off.
We have to, yeah. And there's no doubt about it.
You can't argue otherwise. Bottas is useless. But yeah, ridiculous.
I mean, who's he beating? Joe? I mean, who's he beating? Joe Guan Yu.
I'm gonna do a video.
Fucking cares.
I'm gonna do a video about this week because this argument is so funny because it's like before pre-2022, no one was arguing that Bottas was a brilliant driver. It was always just the car is compliant and Hamilton has off days. Like, you know, that's it. He's a good qualifier. Fair enough. But there was no one going, this guy is an amazing racing driver. And now, because basically the problem is if you say Bottas is worse than Perez, it makes Verstappen look good. So you've just got
and makes Lewis look worse. And that's the whole thing. It makes Lewis look worse.
And none of them want to admit this. They're like, no. It's because he never missed a Q3 in a Mercedes. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, Hamilton has missed 14. So does that mean he's better than Hamilton? So if you're just going to use one stat, then...
Yeah, precisely. You know, and that's the whole thing. That's context. And and they always skip it. Anyways, you know, a perfect... No, it's not a perfect segue. We're talking about Hamilton. Just a simple question. I mean, I think you know the context, and I think everyone who's watching, they also know the context. Was Lewis Hamilton sabotaged by Mercedes in the Canadian Grand Prix?
No. No, obviously not. One thing is his Q2 time was actually good enough for pole. It was still a tenth and a half off of George, but it was good enough for pole. Throughout free practice, he was right up there with George. He's a better qualifier. Look, Bottas beat Hamilton a lot in qualifying, right? So I'm sorry, but Hamilton's specialty has never been as like this amazing qualifier. It just hasn't.
I would disagree.
I think he's a really good qualifier, but Russell is a better qualifier than... I think Russell's faster over one lap, personally.
Yeah, I think right now he is. Okay, I'll just set the stage. So the sabotage allegations, they come in because after the last safety car period, we had Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, both of them pitting. Now, Lewis Hamilton was put on a hard tire because he had already used the medium tire, and they did not want to give him a scrubbed medium because, again, that's the suboptimal way to go about things. Yeah. On the other hand, George was put on a fresh medium tires because he was already on hards. Now, they were 4th and 5th. George tried to put a move on Oscar. He went off and Lewis jumped him. Now, once Lewis jumped him, Lewis ended up jumping Oscar as well, and he was on the podium. According to the cult LH, and actually a lot of sensible Lewis Hamilton fans as well, from this point onwards, George overtook Oscar, and I think it was the second last lap where he also overtook Lewis as well. And I think, again, there are a lot of people who are saying that the Albon move on Daniel and Ocon was good. I think this was the better one because it was in the wet and he just that was right on the edge.
George was faster.
Yeah, the question that the sabotage allegations that actually come up are Mercedes. They intentionally put Lewis on a suboptimal tire. Their hard was a suboptimal tire so that George could get an advantage on him. That's one school of thought. The second school of thought is they should have told both of the drivers to hold positions.
No. Why?
What's your take on it?
So the first thing is, look, I don't want to disparage Hamilton here because Hamilton hasn't been great in qualifying this year. I think that's compared to his teammate anyway, maybe not overall, depends on the car, but compared to his teammate, it's 8-1, I think now, to Russell. So, the reason I don't want to disparage Hamilton is because his qualifying hasn't been great this year, but his racing has actually been really good. He's been really good in the races. So, like, Hamilton, and last year as well, 2023, Hamilton was amazing. So I don't think Hamilton has, like, dropped off. What I think we're seeing here is just a situation of Russell is just a very quick driver, and because of what happened in 2023, everyone just assumes he's washed. He was never as good, and like even Toto's going, "Oh, we should get Verstappen in." It's like no, like you have
Kimi Antonelli. Let me get a teenager in. I mean,
Kimi is fine because that's kind of betting on your like long-term future. Getting Verstappen in is kind of. I know Russell said he doesn't care, but for me, that's like we don't have faith that if we had the car that Russell could bring it home, which is ridiculous. Look, Russell used to be Mr. Saturday. He was quicker. So here's what I'll say about this situation. One, of course, Russell, of course you should let them fight, first of all, because why not? Like, they're fighting for a podium position. It's not like they had the win and they were going to throw a win away. It was like, okay, we're fighting over third and fourth here. It would be unfair if Russell's faster after doing a better job all weekend, basically, apart from free practice, like in qualifying in the race so far. It would be unfair not to say to him, look, take the chance. And like they said, look, guys, you're free to fight. Just the obvious. Don't crash into each other.
Safe.
Which he didn't. So if Hamilton wants to be ahead of Russell, then drive faster. Like, qualify better.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but this is F1. Like, team orders are fine when you're fighting for a championship and it's 4P1. Like, if Russell...
And there's a clear hierarchy.
This is my point. Like, if this was 2021 and it was Hamilton, Verstappen, and every point counts, then you tell Russell, look, I know you want to go for the podium, but we need the points here. Hamilton's way ahead. You need to give him preference. It's not. It's the first time they've been fighting for a podium. You let them fight. Yeah. If Hamilton wanted to be up there, he should have qualified better than 7th when his teammate was on pole. So, faster driver wins. That. It's not sabotage. It's just one driver is better with this car than the other, and it's as simple as that. Like, there's same as last year. They didn't sabotage George. Like, George just couldn't get a handle on the car after Monaco. It took him a long time to get a hold of it. That's it. There's no sabotage.
Same thing happened in Austin as well. Yeah, I think the whole point is exactly they have nothing to gain out of these shenanigans. No. What Toto is trying to do is trying to lure Max Verstappen into his team, or if the thing is there, get Kimi Antonelli in. Mm-hmm. To do that, he wants Mercedes to be in the best possible position in the Constructors' Championship. He has no time for all these bullshit. And the most important part is, the biggest argument is, why did they put Lewis on a hard tire in the final stint and George on a medium tire? The thing is, it's very simple, because earlier in the previous stint, George was able to elaborate that the hard tire would fire up almost as instantaneously as the medium tire did. Sure, they had that. He also overtook Lando in the process. So all of this is nonsense. It comes down to one very basic thing. Young drivers, they have a growth curve. When George joined the team, he was a bit slower in qualifying, but he made it up with consistency in races, and he beat Lewis over the season in 2022. Mm-hmm. Fuck the experiments. In 2023,
the experiments. It's not a thing. Like,
it's not,
because as soon as he won, as soon as he was up there in a race, it was never an experiment.
You don't hear about it.
You
right?
never heard.
You never hear about it.
Not once over that time did we hear that experiment worked. So you're telling me every experiment was wrong? Like, obviously,
and that's the whole fucking bit. And he does not talk about experiments now, right? He does not. And why? Because he was very competitive in the free practice. There's no talk about experiments. The thing is, in 2023, George found the qualifying pace. He was erratic and then lost out in the races. Mm-hmm. What we have right now is George almost being a finished product, with one caveat. He's making a lot of errors. We'll get to that. But there is one thing quite clear, and I think maybe the fans also need to realize this, and maybe George, Lewis, and Toto need to realize this thing very, very clearly. George has clearly surpassed Lewis in terms of driving ability at this stage. He's the faster driver. He's getting the better results. And if Mercedes has to put its eggs in one basket, it has to be George. Stop luring a Max Verstappen or anything.
Yeah.
Just focus on this driver, and I think it's higher time Toto starts focusing on George for a change, because this was the first week where we saw Toto with his focus, George, focus, team radio. And the thing is, you have to be more you have to be there. You have to be there for him, because Toto has been that guiding light for Lewis in a lot of these areas, and you've seen him respond. He's not been there for George as much, and I think George, first of all, showing that he can put the car in pole position, and in my view, the stamp, just stamping his authority was that overtake on Lewis.
Yeah.
That was a bit like, I'm going through, you cannot stop me. It was as clear as that, and it was
a
brutal.
brilliant overtake as well. Like, it's just
100%.
This is the thing.
Lewis had his car right in the middle of the track, and George just went down the inside.
What I'll say about that curve that you were talking about is, I've said this a lot on Wheel Sports as well. I think like Lewis's peak was 2018, and the question is, how much of that, like every driver has their peak, right? How much of that has kind of dropped off? And the thing with Hamilton and Alonso that I'll give both of them is, neither of them have dropped off massively from their peak. They're still at a very high level. They're still close to their peak in terms of their performance. But obviously, you're getting these young drivers who are getting, as you said, up to that peak. So you're going to have that crossover line at some point. It's just aging. It's inevitably going to happen. And Russell has always been a very, very, like what Russell did in Williams, like, just some of the drives he did. Look at when they put him in for Sakir, was it? And just with literally
almost won.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the team clearly favoring Bottas.
What nonsense was. I mean, that was Ferrari level bullshit. But anyways, I think what was telling for me was Lewis, he's starting to get a bit angry now. And he's starting to fish for excuses, which is never a good look. No. Because he's insidiously blamed the team a bit, twice now. He did a bit of this, a bit of it this weekend as well, where he said that maybe I could have stayed out. But the thing is, if he had stayed out and George was behind him on fresher tires, that's an even more complicated situation. That there was no way where he was going to beat George, and I think we're going to reach a point where either Lewis is going to implode at Mercedes, have a rant or something is going to happen, unless Lewis starts beating George.
I mean, at this point,
1-8 is hurting him.
Well, at this point, like, they'll be starting, if they haven't already, to keep him out of technical briefings, right? Obviously, because especially now as well, like, they're going to be talking about 2026, they're going to be talking about 2025. They're not going to want him in the meetings. That, by the way, for any cult members listening who clearly aren't listening, but anyway,
that's basic.
That is normal. That happens in F1. He decided to leave. That was bound to happen. But look, the team will obviously begin now to favor George. Obviously, like Hamilton signed a 2-year contract with a 1+1, and then literally before the season started said, "I have no faith, and I'm off to Ferrari." So obviously they're going to start favoring Russell, right? But if we're talking about conspiracy theories, there was no conspiracy theory this weekend. Russell was just faster. Like, there's no... I'm pretty sure it was even said on Sky Sports. And if it's said on Sky Sports, then, like, Russell was faster. They are the biggest Hamilton fanboys in the world. You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean... it's a bit sad because, he joined Mercedes in 2013. It will be an 11-12 year thing, and he's won 6 world titles. There's almost more than 50% success rate. And I think he's going to leave on a sour note, and
I think he already has. Like, we can see that the way Toto and Lewis kind of talk to each other publicly and about each other publicly and about the team public. Like, Lewis saying, like, what was it with the front wing in Monaco, where we knew he turned it down. We talked about it, and turned down the coin for it, wasn't it? But then kind of in the media said, I didn't get the front wing, as if like it was Mercedes didn't offer it to him. So all these little things build up. And I think the problem he's going to have, though, is if he gets in this mindset this year, at some point he'll just kind of give up on the year, which it sounds like he kind of partly has, because he said, I'm not going to beat George in qualifying this year.
I don't think he can.
It's going to be a real problem in Ferrari, right? Like, he's going into a worse situation.
I think he's going to end up damaging his legacy to such an extent where it's people are. I mean, I never put him as the greatest of all time, and I have my reasons. It's the way he's getting smashed by George right now. There's no other word to describe it. I mean, a lot of people went after Jamie Chadwick because she said the word smashed, but it's true. He is getting smashed right now. He's going to Charles Leclerc's team, where everything is around Charles Leclerc, and Fred Vasseur has been keeping an eye on what's going on at Mercedes. And believe it or not, Fred and Toto are great friends, and they will have conversations about it. How Lewis is away from the grid, and how much of a headache it is to manage him. And if he sees the kind, by the way, I think you might not have caught it. The entire Lewis Hamilton fan brigade, they went on Mercedes LinkedIn and they spammed the whole thing.
Oh, I didn't say it. No, that's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the kind of shit show that is going on. Does Ferrari even want that kind of headache? And
I mean, I don't think Fred has worked with Hamilton before, and I know he likes him. Like, they get on.
Yeah, but he can't drive for him, right?
But he
can't give him better strategies.
This wasn't Fred's decision in reality. This was John Elkins' decision, as far as I know. So this is a marketing. Right. This is, as Jacques Villeneuve would say, this is a marketing opportunity, not a performance on track opportunity. But like
another Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, he's another. Oh Jesus! Don't say that. No, look, Hamilton is performing better than Daniel Ricciardo. The point I wanted to make though is that I think he's going to be in serious trouble next year because they've already kind of built the car now to the point where Leclerc was struggling with the car last year. They've kind of eked those out, and Leclerc now is clearly the better driver. And a confident Leclerc is
dangerous.
Because the thing is, right, Russell, I think, is behind the curve of Leclerc in one area, which is Russell hasn't had that time to kind of eke out. He hasn't had that time at the front to eke out the mistakes, whereas Leclerc, I think, has kind of had those times to fight for wins and podiums where he's kind of got those mistakes out of the way. And I think Russell is still working on that, which is fine. Verstappen did it.
Complete product.
Yeah, Verstappen did it. Norris did it. Leclerc did it. And I feel like
does. Lewis did.
Yeah. So I feel like Leclerc now has kind of moved most of that out of the way. He's not really making silly mistakes like he was in the past. And when he does, his attitude towards it is completely different. It's just like acceptance, right? Move on. Let's go. So I think Hamilton's going to come into a Ferrari with new engineers, a very fast Leclerc who will beat him over one lap. I think, look, if Russell's beating Hamilton over one lap, Leclerc is going to at Ferrari, hands down.
Smashing.
And then you're talking about him having to get used to the car. And I think Fred is probably the type of guy.
Unit.
Different power unit makes a huge difference for drivability, all these different things.
Yeah.
I think that the one area where Fred's going to be quite Fred-like, because Fred is this jokey guy, but he's quite serious behind the scenes, apparently, from everything I've heard. I can imagine they will sit down and he will basically say, look, when it comes to preferential treatment, upgrades, team orders, everything else, we don't do that, but whoever's ahead will get preference. So if you are leading in the points, you will get the upgrade first. If you are leading in the points, you will get the team orders in your favor.
Everything.
If you want to get preference, then earn it on track. And that's the way it's going to go. And I think that as soon as that happens, that is the downfall of that, because Hamilton will think to himself, but I'm the 7-time world champion. I'm brought in by the president. Like, drivers are egotistical, and Hamilton is no different. So that's going to be interesting.
I think, and again, this is where I think Carlos Sainz might actually be smart to, maybe talk to Fred Vasseur. Give me a reserve driver role for a year. Because I don't think Lewis, there is a very, very strong possibility that Lewis does not last more than a year. If he gets a hammering this season, if he gets another hammering next season, oh boy, I mean, would he be even willing to spend another year and possibly get smashed again?
This is the thing is, I like, even easier than that. Like, if they go into 20, he might be able to go like, okay, well, I'll take it for 2025. I'll embed myself in the team, and then if we get a dominant car for 2026, I'll kill it. But I think best case, he stays until the end of 2026, because if they get the title winning car and Leclerc wins the title, I think he's just, that's it. Like, that's his reputation.
I think what if Leclerc does next season alone?
And this
Ferrari,
is why
the trajectory Ferrari is on.
I think you might be onto something there with Sainz, where Sainz says, look, this might not work out. And even though you've thrown me aside for a marketing opportunity or whatever way you want to call it, Villeneuve, like, I think this is probably why Sainz has said, look, I'll take the Williams seat because Audi want to lock me in, and Vowles is willing
Williams
to say,
is-
like, at the end of each season, I can leave if I get an offer from a team that is X positions ahead of us in the constructors or something. You know, so
Yeah.
if a top 3 team offers me a seat, I can end the contract early. So he can sign a 2 or 3 year contract with Williams that says, right at the end of each season, if Ferrari come calling, I'm free to go. You know, whereas Audi won't want
precisely.
that. Audi will say, no, you're in for the 2+1 at least. So maybe that's why Sainz has
Yeah.
gone to Williams. Maybe he's thinking, right, well, I'll have a tough time at Williams in 25, and then I'll get a seat in 26 if Max goes to Mercedes, or, you know, if Hamilton falls apart at Ferrari, or, you know, Piastri
Something
crashes.
happens. Anything could happen,
Yeah.
right? Anything could happen. And I mean, and again, talking about Ferrari, I think it's about we switch gears and we actually talk about the shit show that Ferrari did. I mean, screw you, man. It was entirely. Here I was. I sat down on this fucking channel and I talked about, and I predicted Max Verstappen is going to have a DNF. Charles Leclerc is going to win the race. Lando Norris will be P2. Why? Because I wanted a title battle. And what did we have? You sat down. Okay, I think Ferrari had a great weekend in Monaco. Now, just like the Ferrari tradition, they're going to fuck up.
Yeah.
And oh god, how badly did they fuck up?
Listen, I thought they'd be bad, but my brain was thinking they'll be like P6, P7. They'll somehow end up like, you know, they'll end up behind both Mercedes or both Ferrari and McLaren. And I was thinking, worst case, one of the Astons or Mercedes gets in there. I did not expect 0 points, like a double DNF. I did not expect that.
The best part was Charles Leclerc after a couple of laps. Why am I struggling on the straights? The race engineer said, your power unit is not working properly. And I'm fantastic. Already starting the race outside top 10, and now the power unit is not working.
And
how am I going to overtake people?
And then does a Control-Alt-Delete reboot on his car, right? And they're like, oh,
I mean, how stupid is...
we fixed the engine. Let's chuck some hards on. What are you doing? Like, if they had to put inters on at that point, it would have been like, okay, there's a chance here, because it would have been back at the safety car. He could have at least tried to come through the field. But as soon as they put the cards, it was like, this is not going to... What are you doing? Like,
yeah, I mean, on a track where there's rain. I mean, this was... I mean, this made me go back to 2009 Sepang, where Ferrari put Kimi Raikkonen out on intermediates on a bone dry track that maybe it might rain. What are we doing here?
Yeah. Oh, they've made some stinkers over
God.
the years. This is the thing where, like, it's just such a Ferrari thing to do. I had a feeling, I was like, this is just such a Ferrari thing to do. Come off this brilliant weekend, be in the title fight, and then throw everything away.
Everything is gone. He's
on the plus
56
side,
points behind now.
On the plus side,
okay, there's a plus side.
Yeah. They've made every mistake possible. Right? They can't possibly have a worse race than that for the rest of the season, can they? Like, maybe they just said, let's make every mistake this weekend so we can fix them all and move on and hunt down Verstappen.
I mean, there's one intrinsic problem that Ferrari showed this weekend, though. I'm getting to the more serious bit.
One.
I think one that would actually might haunt them for the rest of the season, and it's their inability to actually generate temperature in the tires.
I was just going to say,
it fucked them over in China.
They are the opposite of Mercedes. This was my point about Mercedes. Mercedes can heat up the tires, but then they are harder on wear. Ferrari are now very good on their tires, but it means when you need to get the heat in them, and they're screwed.
Yeah, and ideally you'd see these teams. Okay, if they are very slow in terms of getting the tires up to temperature, you'd expect them to have strong tire life, and maybe later in the stint the cars are just they're very quick, they're basically lapping faster than anyone else because the intrinsic pace is there. It doesn't happen with Ferrari. If the tires are not in temperature, they still continue to grain and get worse, and which is basically the worst of both worlds, and just they have to fix this, because again, rain is a part of racing, right? And if every time there's rain you're just screwed, then that is going to have a major impact.
Yeah, it's not even that. It's just if you have a track that's not very abrasive, then you've got these issues as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think, is it Bahrain that's not? No, Bahrain is very abrasive, isn't it? It's one of the other circuits I'm trying to think of. Is it Jeddah that's not very abrasive? But anyway, there's a couple of tracks that aren't. And,
Jeddah isn't.
yeah, and Ferrari.
Jeddah isn't.
Yeah, and Ferrari weren't.
By the way,
brilliant
Monaco is also not abrasive, but Ferrari did well. So
yeah, that's true. But then Monaco's a very strange track, and Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Ferrari
very
should have
unique.
been good around here for that one reason. But
if I think if it had stayed dry, I would have expected Ferrari to do well, because the basic thing, it rides the curbs very well, and that was very important.
the straight line speed is the problem, though, isn't it? They're not. Are they particularly quick in the straights? I think they're one of the slower of the top three.
They were nowhere this season, this weekend, because I mean, you can't really make a judgment. They were nowhere. You cannot look at their lap times and reach a conclusive idea of where Ferrari is supposed to be.
I think, in fairness, the one thing I would say is, look, I think this is one of those anomalous weekends that you can kind of, which again is why I don't want to get anywhere excited for Mercedes either, because I'm kind of like, sure, but Daniel Ricciardo was P5 and we know how terrible, he's never been good in his whole career. So like, he was P5 in qualifying. You had, was it both Alpines were up in the points by the end of the race as well?
Yeah.
Like, this was one of those just crazy races where it was just a race of attrition. And I think,
you just had to be there and you'll score points.
Yeah, so I think
that's what it came down to.
I think that Ferrari Ferrari is still in there for constructors, but Leclerc just unfortunately, if Leclerc had a good weekend, he could have lost like 7 or 10 points to Verstappen instead of 25.
25. Yeah. All of it is gone, and that's it's and funnily he's still second in the championship, so maybe, and which actually makes it sad, because it again Max's gap to the second to the closest challenger is 56 points, which is massive.
Yeah,
and
but it's only
moving on
61 to Norris, so
yeah, I mean, they're probably going to battle for P2 again, which would be interesting. Moving on from Ferrari, the Italian one, to the French Ferrari. I mean,
do we need to talk about Alpine? It's terribly depressing.
Yeah, I don't want to, but do you remember the 2013 Formula 1 season where Kimi Raikkonen was basically not being paid, because if he was paid, then the team would have to be shut down. That was the kind of pay that was
the season where he was getting a bonus for every point or something, wasn't it?
From 2012 onwards, he was getting a bonus for every point and bonus for a win, for podiums, etc.
Because they thought he couldn't do good in the car, and then he just ended up scoring a ton of points.
they thought the car couldn't do good.
Yeah.
That was the first
they forgot
impression.
That Kimi Raikkonen is an incredible driver before he kind of just said, right, I'll switch off and just take some cash,
And in 2013, after mid-season, around mid-season, Kimi announced that he was moving to Ferrari, and then all of a sudden his pace dropped. Lotus, I think under Eric Boulier and Alain Permain, they started completely backing the other driver, Romain Grosjean at the time, and there were a lot of instances of basically shouting. I think Alain Permain shouted at Kimi in the Indian Grand Prix only. I see a few similarities here, because I don't see the point in when there are 2 laps left. What's the point of switching places when the driver ahead is already 2.5 seconds ahead?
That Lotus is the Lotus that became Renault again, right? Or was that the other?
Yeah,
Lotus?
it's the same.
Yeah. I was just thinking.
It's the same DNA. Yeah. And the question that comes up is why do something like this? And again, they had it in mind.
Have you met the French?
I haven't. I mean, I actually haven't. I mean, I've met a few in the exchange programs during my MBA, but other than that, no. And one thing that I've realized is that at least in my view, I think Bruno Famin has taken it on his ego, and that's why he fired. I think we can say that he probably fired Ocon, and right now he's trying to justify this position that Ocon has been fired And he has to justify it to the board because most probably he's going to hire a rookie. Jack Doohan is probably going to take that seat. Somewhere down the line, Bruno has to justify to the higher ups
Maybe it's a
that I
genius
made
plan.
the right call. How? I mean,
Well, I mean, how
Doohan
much?
is
How
good.
much was?
He's not that good.
How much was Ocon getting paid?
Not much. I don't think so.
No, but-
they neither of them get paid that much.
No, and also it doesn't come out with a budget cap. But the point is that Alpine or Renault aren't giving Alpine much money, right? So maybe he just needed that
Yeah.
cash for development. So he decided to just kind of cause problems. And also, perhaps it was a case of Alpine weren't getting much screen time this year. So maybe it was a genius move for the advertising. You know, like let's start a bit of drama, get ourselves on telly.
Yeah,
a
but
bit
that
more.
would. Yeah, but that would actually involve tact and sensible
That would-
thinking
that
and
would-
using the
that would involve
and
some
using
intelligence.
something between the ears.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've not seen Bruno Furman
Neither
do
of
that
us.
often.
I don't know. Like the team is just inexplicably shit at the moment. I can't like.
It's. I think one thing that stood out is I think Ocon started at the back of the grid and Gasly was 2 to 3 places ahead. If it was not these two drivers and maybe someone like probably a rookie, Alpine is not getting this result of a P9, P10. It's probably going to end up outside of points. Why?
Or crashing.
Just look at how Sauber is faring right now. Just look at Joe and Bottas doing basically
That
nothing.
famous rookie Bottas. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing worse than Perez. We should always specify that. The thing is, it's what pisses me off is I think he also talked about it in front of the French media. He did not say these things in front of the English media. He said that I'm driving the overweight chassis because apparently Alpine, the works team, can only get one light
down
chassis.
to weight. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other chassis, I think 10 kgs heavier, and and Ocon is driving that one.
10
He had
kilos
the
heavier.
Yeah,
That's
apparently
like 3/10 of extra lap time or
two
something.
and a half tenths something. Yeah,
Yeah,
they said
yeah,
2.5 tenths. So
Jesus.
it's 10 kgs heavier that is driving. He reaches points, and there was no scope by which he could Gasly could actually reach Ricciardo or overtake him. Funny thing is, he lets Gasly go. On the last lap, he's lining up Gasly for a pass because Ocon was actually faster than him. And at that point, the team radio comes in that you cannot jump him. And like, what the fuck are we doing here?
It
It was entirely down to
It's just a terrible team. Like I think the thing is, like, you'd expect these things from a Haas. This is what I said at the start of the season. Is like, if this wasn't a works team, you'd kind of be going, just a shit team. I think it's just the fact that it's a works. Like, this is the Renault works team, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, no, like I can't.
Does it make sense?
But they haven't got one single ounce of any sort of plan that I can see. Like, Bruno Faman hasn't come out and said, well, the plan is, next year we're hiring this guy and we're upgrading the facilities and we're doing X, Y, and Z. And like, with Aston Martin, even at the moment, like with Aston failing, you're like, okay, well, they're still hiring, they're planning towards 2026 and they're building or they still haven't got their wind tunnel online.
Every week, a top engineer is actually linked to Aston Martin. Recently, it was Enrico Cardile.
Yep.
Which
Mattia
engineer has been
Binotto,
linked to Alpine?
Like, this is my point.
Mattia Binotto.
There's not a single, like, not even just Alpine. Like, the Audi works team has the same. Williams being in a position where they're like, we might actually be able to sign Carlos Sainz, shows James Vowell's plan clearly makes sense, and Sainz is thinking, right, if you guys are willing to give me an out clause and I can see the progress here, I'd rather he'd rather go there than Audi. That's insane. Like, every other team except for Haas and Alpine have a plan. Haas making Alpine look bad is hilarious, right? Because Haas are
so funny.
Haas are terrible, but they've got one good thing going for them, which is, well, two things. One is Hulkenberg, obviously, who's leaving, but also the other one is the fact that they had a good car last year. They just needed to fix the tires. They've fixed the tires.
They did. Yeah.
They'll fall back over the course of the season, I think. But like,
yeah.
I
mean, if you're if you're a driver on the market, would you even want to drive for Alpine right
No,
now?
like unless you go into that, like if they sign someone,
Why?
if they sign a decent driver, like if they Sainz, I don't think would ever go back there because I think he's pissed at them after them throwing him out for Ricardo, basically, which
Yeah.
worked out well for him in the long run, getting him to Ferrari and everything. But that's beside the point. But like, if they sign
I think even otherwise, what's the point? I mean, look, Gasly, Sainz, again, the lineup is good. But why would Sainz even
this
risk
is
it?
my point.
The
Like,
team,
if they
team's a
sign
hellhole.
well, this is my point though. If they manage to sign someone that both of us are like, why would they go there? Like if they pull that off,
Yeah.
then I'll think to myself, okay, maybe behind the scenes, behind all the chaos, maybe Bruno Famin has some sort of plan that he's like, look, this makes sense, and the driver's like, okay, I can see this. But I don't see any element of that at the moment. It seems to me like Bruno Famin's plan is, let me run the fucking price of this place down to the ground so that we can sell it. Like, get this place to be worth so little that Renault finally say, right, look, sell the goddamn thing so that I can go home and relax.
I can't. And in all of this, what is Gasly thinking?
He has no better
been,
options.
Any option is better option.
But no, there's no
I'll
better.
Be honest.
I don't think Audi would eye up Gasly at the minute. Like I think they're pushing for someone else.
It's not about it's not about teams eyeing up Gasly. It's about teams being a better option than Alpine.
Yeah,
I think every team is a better option.
Of
than
course,
Alpine
yeah,
right
but
now.
I don't think there's
without a
any
doubt.
team looking at Gasly at the minute. Like,
Yeah.
I
mean, it doesn't look good for him, and I think that's why he's sitting pretty, earning the money. And again, talking about the driver market, it does appear that how it's going to settle down is Sainz moves to Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
which is crazy,
basically,
by the way. If someone told me at the start of the season that there's a chance Sainz will go to Williams, I'd be like, this is insane. Like, what has happened?
Yeah. I think he'll have to take he'll actually need to meet his whatever deity there is, cause that kind of shit luck when you're winning with Ferrari and you're being thrown off the bus and you have to drive for Williams, which is 8th or 9th best.
Personally,
team on the grid.
I blame Jos Verstappen, but that's a different.
Yeah, everyone does.
It's
And
Jos
Helmut
Verstappen's
Marko.
fault that Sainz isn't replacing Perez. Let's be honest here.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah.
fair. Pretty. I mean, that's fair. But I mean,
I just blame Jos for
there's
everything
no
bad
doubt.
in F1.
we should. We should. I mean,
Yeah.
that should be the tagline.
You know, like the Wikipedia thing where if you click enough links, it's like 7 links, you can always get to Hitler. Like there's just a way.
Yeah.
I think with F1 it's like that. If you like abstract like 4 things out, you can always say something is shit because of Jos. Like you can link it back.
Yeah.
I might create a system for that. I'm sure there's some sort of way I could link it. Like
There has to
create
be
a
one.
big graphic where it's like everything shit at F1 links back to Jos somehow.
Yeah. And I mean, personally, I was honestly hoping that Kushmani's he did the private test with Alpine recently. I was actually hoping he might get the seat. I mean, personally, I would hope that both Gasly and Ocon they fuck off from Alpine, and then there are 2 vacancies, and no one in their right mind would actually go to Alpine. So Alpine is forced to sign the Indian driver and the Australian driver. But again, that's a pipe dream. But I think the whole driver market is more or less settled now, isn't it? Because
I mean, we've got
Carlos goes to Williams.
We've got Stroll at Aston, which
We don't talk about him.
unless Stroll goes to
screwed.
WEC, which I'm still hoping happens. He'll be
God.
there next year. Yeah, so Carlos to Williams. The Haas seats is probably Behrman in one of them, right? Even though I think that's probably a mistake for Behrman, but I guess it's his only option.
Yeah.
Because it's the only Ferrari powered seat realistically. Sauber technically, but not really anymore. Who sits alongside him though? Ocon at Haas?
There are 2 currently the option how it settles down is for Audi. For Ocon, the option is first option is Audi, second option is Haas. For Audi, the first option is Sainz, second is Ocon.
Right.
Now, since Sainz is going to Williams, Ocon goes to Audi.
Right, okay.
And for Haas, I think it's Valtteri Bottas who slots in.
Yeah, I guess that
Which
makes
would be
sense
good.
for him. If they can't get a better
Yeah.
driver like Perez, then I suppose they should probably go there, yeah.
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 I think that's it, right? The driver market, that's about it.
And
There's
then
no other team left.
I think Alpine basically just settles for Doohan, right? Like they've already got him on the books.
No. Doohan settles for Alpine.
Yes, sorry.
Let's get it right. And Gasly also has no other option. And yeah, the whole thing is. By the way, what's your take on Audi right now?
I'm a little bit concerned that everyone's underestimating how good they can do. I said at the start when Seidel moved to Sauber, right? I said they're going to do one of two things between now and 2025. They're either going to try and absolutely succeed in every manner, like, you know, to prove that they're ready, or they're going to look like absolute shit because they're going to just be stress testing everything to tell Audi, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. So that then when basically over 25, then Audi invest like crazy in X, Y, and Z. In 25, they don't actually need the car to improve because basically in 25, the plan is Audi's going to put their engine into a 24 car, I think it is, or a 25 car. And use it as a mule car to just test the engine, basically. So all they need to know...
I think the IC is already done.
Yeah. So all they need to know, basically, is what's the current pace so we can compare it to the pace with this engine. That's basically all.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't actually need the car on track to improve. And in fact, I think it kind of makes more sense because the more improvement you do now, you're just wasting time, effort, and energy that you could be putting into 2026, right? So I kind of think that they've gone that route. And the reason I say that is because I'm a little bit shocked by just how bad Sauber is at the minute. And that tells me it's like when you've got...
It's bad.
It's really bad.
It's so bad.
Let's be honest here. Seidel is not a bad team principal. They've got cash coming in. I just think it's like, okay, why are you wasting cash in a cost cap era on the current car? So maybe the kind of roughly 8 to 10 million that you'd normally spend on just pure car development, maybe they're like, let's put that into other areas of the team because we don't really care. We're not even building a car for these regulations anyway. So, like, you know, what's the point? Especially when 2026 cars now are going to be so different. Like, basically my point is they can learn everything about ground effect from these cars being shit anyway. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. They can get all the learning. As long as it correlates, they're fine. So all they need to do is, okay, is it shit in the wind tunnel? Yes. Is it shit on the track? Yes. Is it the same level of shit that we expect? Yes. Right, correlation's fine. You know, like, from an engineering point of view, it's fine.
It's perfect. And tell me one thing. It's been 9 races this season. In how many races has Andreas Seidel made an appearance?
Has he appeared once? I don't know.
Once.
One. So that tells you kind of everything you need to know. He's not interested in the team at the minute.
He's interested, but he's interested in the background.
What I mean, yeah. He's not
basically
interested
what you said earlier.
Yeah.
He's not interested in the here and now. What I think I talked about it earlier as well. Last time we talked about it, he came in to try to sign Carlos. He had a chat with him. Apparently, both of them had a shouting match in the previous race, wherever it was. And things kind of ended on a rough note. Mm-hmm. So that's why the whole Williams thing seems to be going on. And it's all, we're basically spitting in the wind right now because there is no idea we can actually make a correct judgment here. It does appear in my view that since last season, Seidel has been sitting back. Mm-hmm. And the reason behind it is not that he's not interested in the project. It's because he's sat down and analyzed what needs to be done at Sauber to actually help it reach the level where it needs to be when Audi makes an appearance. Mm-hmm. And I think 2024, we're in 24, right? It is the last season where I feel Sauber is going to suck.
Well,
from next season onwards.
Next season they'll be crap as well because they're not going to develop this car.
I think not. The reason behind it is by the 2024 and 2023 seasons have been the ones where they've sat back and analyzed what all things are just not working. Mm-hmm. And Seidel has done a lot of that. apparently.
But do you think?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. Can you just clarify there? Do you think the car is going to be good next year, or do you just think the team is going to be more efficient?
I think right now the team that we have, it cannot do a pit stop in less than 10 seconds. It cannot have a strategy that actually works. The car sucks. The drivers honestly suck. There's nothing that, and the livery is a piece of shit. So there's nothing that goes for the team at this stage. But I expect next season is, since this is the this is actually their foundation point. This is the baseline from where they're going to start. They will start their work because Audi does not want to be embarrassed in 2026. When they enter, they don't want the team to be incompetent.
This is why I think that the car will be shit, but the operations will be great, right? Because
you can say that
from 2025, or sorry, from June, the end of June, the end of this month, they basically are allowed to start working on from January 1st, they're allowed to start working on the 2026 cars, right? However, they get the final regulations at the end of this month, right? That's the plan.
It's supposed to happen, but again, we know
basically they can't do aerodynamic. There's a very clear clarification, which is they get the regulations. Let's say end of June is the plan. Say it's the end of July, whatever. They get the regulations then, right? They're not allowed to do aerodynamic work until the end of January, right? Or start of January, sorry.
Because the human brain works that way.
Yeah. So, but my point is, they can still put all their engineers on trying mechanical things, working on suspension ideas. There's lots of things they could do with the mechanics, like the platform of the car. They don't necessarily, they might not be able to start building it, but they can definitely start concepting, trying things out. And then in January, they bring all of those ideas into the wind tunnel, right? And they start going crazy. So my point is, why would they spend any of this year working on the 25 car when they could just literally say, let's just carry the 25 car over, or the 24 car over, right? I
think they would.
I just think they'll do a Haas 21.
The reason... No, I think they would. The reason behind it is because, I think you're going to see every team next season, they have a strong start to the season, and then one major upgrade package, that's it. That's going to be every team's policy next season, because first of all, the regulations are coming in way too late. It should not be this late, but it is what it is for Formula 1 right now.
That's a good thing.
The thing that because we don't see the same thing that happened in 2014
and 2022 as well. We're in cost cap and they're getting them late, so it should help diminish the amount of a jump that one team can do.
Precisely.
Maybe, it depends. If someone gets a silver bullet, then that's out the window.
That's what I think I'll get to that as well. Just to end the Audi point, the thing is, the team that started when Seidel took over, the entire equipment were outdated. The entire facilities were outdated. They didn't have the right people. They didn't have the right engineers as well. I mean, that's well documented right now. What Seidel has done, and I think maybe James Key is a part of it as well, because honestly, James Key joined last season. I have not seen him even once. Is he even working on these cars? What is he doing? It does appear, they are both sitting in the background and they're working on it. And by the way, McLaren, James Key, Seidel, they work together.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets that. And there's something that's going on. And what I feel is, what Audi would want to do is, Audi would want a dress rehearsal of at least a decent enough car and get all the operational
you're thinking
logs
23,
out of the way
24,
in 2025.
Well, 23, 24 is kind of get all of the aerodynamic stuff, kind of like the engineering side.
Everything in place.
Engineering side in place. So then midway through 2024, you basically say, right, forget about 2024 and try and build the best chassis you can for 2025 so that we can then stress test, is everything working? And then do an operational.
Everything, and by everything, I mean the team should not look incompetent when Audi comes in. How does a team look incompetent when the pit stops are not good, when the strategies are poor, when basic things are not working? If Audi is P6 in 2026, they will consider it a win. I mean, for sure, if they are P6. And that is what they're going to target, roughly around that. And I think if we consider that Alpine is going to be 10th anyway, so they have only 3 teams to beat. And if Alpine is going to be their platform, they will be there. And the word that
Andretti
Peter used for Daniel was cockroach. So I think Alpine has been that for Formula One as well for a while now.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see. Like, I mean, I just wonder. Like, I think you're right. Okay, so maybe what they could do is spend half of this year and just see, like, basically say, look, you can now see what everyone else on the grid has. Build something for the start of 2025, and you don't need to upgrade it. Just see how it is at the start of 2025. See what a jump you can make. Test all the systems that we've been building for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, see what happens here. But I think 2025, I don't think they bring a single upgrade, to be honest. Not one.
Yeah, I don't see any team bringing too much, to be honest,
Yeah.
because first of all, it's a cost cap. And I think, this is a perfect time to pivot to this thing. We'll talk about it in very brief because I'm hoping to get someone on for the next time. The 2026 regulations, what's your first view? First impression on the whole thing?
I'm more optimistic about it than I was before, because I've started to think about it in terms of like the 2022 regs, right? Which is these regulations are for 2026 are going to likely be more prescriptive than the last ones, right? Because the FIA will have learned some of the loopholes and so on. So they're basically going to go, it's now an even tighter regulation set with less wobble, right? Now that annoys me in one part because I kind of would prefer it to go the other way. But but I like engineering before the drivers, so I'm weird there. I would rather, not that I'd rather have a dominant season, but I would rather have a little bit more freedom in engineering, even if it means 3 or 4 years to catch up. That's kind of my view. Yeah. But I'm more optimistic now because one, I think we're going to see the teams tighter at the start than we have before. Just because one, those regulations will be tighter, and two, because unlike 2022, the teams have less time to work on them and they're under cost cap. Like, we need to remember that for the 2022 regulations, one, the teams had a full extra year to work on these cars, right? Because remember, it was postponed. These were originally, everyone hates these regulations, but remember, if these regulations did come in, that Hamilton Verstappen fight would have never happened anyway, because But my point is that was an extra year that they got to work on them. And when they got the regulation set, they weren't under cost cap. So the teams were able to invest a ton of money into, for example, I'm sure Nui could have said, look, these are the 5 different suspension types I think are going to work. Let's build all of them now and see what fucking happens before this cost cap comes in 2021. You know, let's go crazy on this. So, and also in 2020, there were less races. So, they all invested a shit ton of money during that time into the 2022 regs.
Yeah.
They don't have the chance to do that this year. So it should be a more level playing field where Renault's at the bottom and then everyone else should be a little bit closer to each other. So I'm somewhat optimistic, and I think I'm just happier because they got rid of DRS, right? They've now gone more, goddamn thumbs up thing. They've got rid of DRS. Yeah. They've somewhat brought kind of a quote unquote push to pass kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's better anyway than DRS. I think DRS passing is boring anyway. So I think giving the driver more control over that is always going to be better for racing. And one of the other key elements that I'm really excited about after seeing them is they've placed more emphasis on the mechanical grip, and they've made the tires smaller. Not by much, but by a little bit, which means that we should get...
It makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, so we should get a situation where the drivers have to basically use their own skill to keep the tires in the window and to pass, which should give us better racing, I think, overall. But we'll see. I could be completely wrong. Could get to 2026 and be like, these cars are shit. What's going on here? And Audi could bring the best engine in the world and end up somehow pulling a Braun GP, like... It's unlikely, but it could happen.
Imagine Nico Hülkenberg winning a championship without even having a podium for like 80 years in Formula One.
That would be unfortunate for me, because I've said that the moment Hülkenberg gets a podium, that I'm stopping I'm stopping all my F1 content. So that'd be unfortunate for this podcast as well.
Oh God. Yeah, let's think about that then. I mean, honestly, you actually sound very upbeat about the whole thing. I'm more on the other side of things, because when I looked at the regulations, it does appear one thing is quite clear. They had the power unit regulations in place. They've created the cars so that these cars are fast enough because of the deficiencies that the power unit has. And what that does is it changes the objective of the entire thing. The 2022 regulations, their main objective was prescriptive. It was going to be very prescriptive, where you more or less knew how the cars would look. Secondly, the cars would be easier to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, both those things are thrown out of the brief. They are not part of the brief. F1 has not even actually even advertised this thing that the cars next time around are going to be easier to follow. That's not even
they
a conversation.
should be under this though, because that's the point of removing that kind of 30% of downforce as well. You get less dirty air.
It should be, but the problem is that 30% downforce that gets removed. It's actually the ground effect thing. We don't have ground effect anymore in 2026. With ground effect, it's the turbulent air that gets produced is much lesser because the whole effect is different. With active aero, you have much higher aero wake or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
The turbulence, basically, in simple terms, it's going to be much higher. And the biggest problem in all of this is you are basically cooking up a regulation so that the cars are fast enough. They don't suck, to be honest. That's the whole thing. And to basically have this power unit formula be in place. Why? Because these new manufacturers or constructors have actually lobbied bringing the whole thing in place.
Yeah.
And when that is the thought process behind the regulations, it makes me nervous how the whole thing is actually going to work. Plus, the teams have already started complaining.
Yeah.
They're talking about a 30 kg drop in the minimum weight of the car.
Yeah.
And teams have basically said it's not possible. Alonso has come out and said, Lewis has said that it's just not possible. Because you're increasing the size of batteries.
Yeah.
It's only going to add to weight.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard, and we might end up having all of these black liveried cars once again. And I really don't want that kind of thing in place.
That's true. I mean,
so, yeah.
I'm more optimistic about it. I think it might work. I to be honest, I've never been a huge fan of the idea of the engines going more electric because the technology.
Yeah, me neither.
The reason is just, it's not because, like, I think electric cars are great. Like, you know, I like them. But my problem is the technology is just not there to where you're going to have a hybrid system that basically, the only way to go more and more electric is to basically make the hybrid system just a generator for the electric. So that's just never going to be a fun way to do racing. You know, you either have one or the other, kind of. You either have all electric.
I think the world is also starting to realize that electric is not the answer.
I think the thing is
nuclear.
Nuclear is the, but electric cars are part of that, right? So if you had all nuclear power, then electric cars make perfect sense, because then you've got just nuclear power everywhere, clean energy powering clean cars. And even,
but the problem is these electric cars require a lot of lithium, and for that Elon Musk has to talk to weird.
But at the same time,
presidents.
If you look at the new LFP batteries, even over the course of the last 5 years, they've removed cobalt and what's the other thing? It was cobalt and I can't remember the other thing. My point is though that this always happens with technology. Slowly over time, it gets better. And to be honest, they're going to have to, as electric cars increase, they're going to have to make something that is less of a problem to get in terms of lithium, first of all.
Yeah, possibly.
So, like, it's electric technology. Just to me, just like, as I'm a big petrol head. Like, you know, if like I was saying, like, if in the next 5 years I buy a sports, like a proper sports car, it's not going to be an electric one. It's going to be like a 911, right? Because I'm like, I want that power. Like, I know that an electric car will be faster in 5 years' time than a petrol-powered 911. But there is something.
It's not the same.
There's something about the experience of that, and that's what I am hopeful that there has been some noise out of F1 that perhaps the best way to go after these regulations is, because they're going 100%
sustainable fuel,
to kind of go, right, let's say V8s, you know, bring back V8s, sustainable fuel, you know, and that is probably where the sports car side of you know, super.
They're starting to move towards
that. Like, even like, I think Porsche has been building a situation where they could have fully sustainable fuels in the 911, because they know the 911 can't go fully electric. It's not a 911 then. Ferrari are going to want
it won't be the same thing.
Yeah, and Ferrari and Lamborghini want their V12s. Like, there's going to be these cars that just are like that. So, like, it can't go all electric.
Interesting. I mean, it's very... But again, that ends, I think,
2039.
only how. Yeah, that's a decade, 15 years. It's not that long.
No.
Who knows? I mean, I'm slightly skeptic, but I'm not. I don't know. I looked at the regulations and my first thought contradicted everyone else's, because everyone I saw was, yes, this is great, this is perfect. But
It's far from perfect.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people thought that way. I mean, look, they are all happy that the ground effect is gone, because apparently that is the root of all evils, and that is going to lead to Red Bull's collapse.
The ground
which
effects
is utterly stupid.
The ground effect's not completely gone either. They're just removing the potency of it and less reliable on it.
Yeah.
So like the cars will be
Yeah.
kind of like 50-50 mechanical grip and ground effect, and you know, that's kind of the idea.
I mean, that much was always there, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, it's not the again. Yeah, as you said, the potency of
I
it.
just think the good news is that like the regulations, like you said, are even more prescriptive, right? Which again, this is good news, I think, for fans who just want.
I'm not sure if they are. I don't think they are prescriptive, because again, how can you make the regulations prescriptive when the entire grid will be working for the first time on active error? They've not done that before, and the experience counts.
Yeah.
So everyone is walking into the dark right now, and there are concerns, a lot of concerns. I would have ideally wanted F1 to just, push the whole thing back a couple of years. Just let the sport grow.
Yeah.
Ideally. But again, it is what it is.
Personally, for me, I really like the idea now of opening up the regulations a little bit. But like, the reason I say that is just I think like the perfect idea is that everyone has the same aero time, the same wind tunnel time, all those sorts of things. Everyone has the same cost cap, and then you go, right, now let's open the regulations a little bit and let the engineers kind of go wild and get back to what F1 was about.
I think this was what I think Mark Priestley also talked about, the same thing, that he said, I would rather want to give the engineers the full freedom. Do whatever you want to. These are the number of hours. This is your budget. But you're free to do whatever you want. You can have some
regulations, like, like it's not going to be like the old.
Again, yeah.
It's not going to be like the old days,
will be there,
because you're still going to say, right, look, you still have to have your survival style here, the halo here. You've still got to have.
The formula needs to be there.
So you have like a formula, but just open it much wider than it was before. Because, like, I am worried that the more and more, like, I think the prescriptive is probably good if you just want a close field, and that's fine. I get that. Yeah. But the problem with that is every time you make it more prescriptive, you do take some of the kind of magic away from Formula One. Like that's the differentiator. And that's, these fans who've complained, these ground effect regulations are shit because Hamilton's not winning or whatever it is, like.
Fans are stupid.
But the point is, they're just like, these regulations are shit because of X driver, or, they can't drive the car. And it's like, yeah, okay, but I don't really care which driver wins. It's all about the engineers for me. I want to see which team builds the coolest thing. That's the whole point of this sport. That's why I love this. Like everyone, if you want really good racing, everyone's telling me go watch Indy. And there's a reason I don't watch.
No, it's not fun.
No, but
it's not fun.
Is it not? Okay.
I mean, it's fun apparently, but why would you want to watch the F1 rejects? I mean, the driving quality is not the same level.
But like, I think it's just even if you said like the same drivers, for me, it's like if you put the same drivers in a spec series, it's just, I don't know, it's not the same sport.
Takes the magic away.
Like So, look, I'm excited for 2026 because I think just, as we saw in 2022, you can go as prescriptive as you want, and these people will still find loopholes and workarounds. Like, I mean, even Newey, when he saw the Mercedes, that obviously didn't work, but even Newey saw it and went, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Like, that's, like there was a wide range of cars. They always converge. So, the other thing is we can't change it now. These regulations are fucking coming. So we might as well be optimistic about it because it's going to happen. Yeah. Whether you like it or not.
Precisely. I mean, enjoy the next 18 months and then let's see what Audi does.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that concludes this edition of the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast.
The name
I think it's been fucking finally. You put it on tape, huh? That's why I made it sure I actually mention it right now. Anyways, I think it's been fun. F1 it's in the best place possible. I mean, maybe it would have been better if Max did not have a 56-point advantage. But still, Every race we don't know is going to win. During the race we don't know is going to win. I'm not sure we'll get that often in F1. So fans, stop whining, start watching and enjoy.
Yeah.
This period is not going to
And
come back
Alpine,
again.
make a fucking plan.
And leave.
Yeah, just leave. Just either convert back to Renault or just leave. You know, convert back to Renault, hire some good people, go crazy, make a good engine for the first time in years.
Oh God, yeah.
Not gonna happen though.
And and just to conclude, please subscribe, please like the video, drop a comment, say Lewis Hamilton is the GOAT. Just drop this comment. I mean, a lot of people actually think so. So
Yeah. Say Daniel Ricciardo was never good.
Yeah, we love Daniel Ricciardo. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. And I hope we have someone talking about the new regulations next time around. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Bottas is worse than Perez. Bye.